Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my report this afternoon, which is all about contemporary philosophy. So, to fully understand what's happening in the present, there's a saying that we first have to go back from the past. So, before we start discussing, let me take you first to the past. Let's start in the 16th century philosophy. So at this time, it's generally regarded as the later part of Renaissance philosophy. It is also known as the High Renaissance, which is considered to succeed from the Renaissance philosophy era and precede the age of rationalism. Then, during the 16th century, it is characterized by a mixture of humanist and scholastic traditions. Now, for the 17th century philosophy, it is generally regarded as seeing the start or the beginning of the so-called modern philosophy. The 18th century is known as the Age of Enlightenment, or simply the Age of Reason. So during this time, there was an intellectual and philosophical movement that dominated in the world of ideas in Europe, which includes ideas more about pursuit of happiness, separation of the church and the state, liberty, progress, toleration, including fraternity as well. Then later on, in the 19th century, philosophers of the 18th century from the Enlightenment began to have dramatic effect, which results to some developments in the 19th century. So, in line with this reaction, there was a movement that arose known as Romanticism, which began to develop towards the end of the 18th century. And finally, the 20th and the 21st century, which provided the development of the old philosophies, meaning the birth of new philosophies like phenomenology, existentialism, post-structuralism, and others. Alright, so I am showing you now a table where we can see here the traditional philosophy on the left side and the modern contemporary philosophy on the right side. So for the traditional philosophy, we have naturalism, idealism, pragmatism, and realism. For the modern contemporary, we have existentialism, progressivism, behaviorism, humanism, experimentalism, eclecticism, reconstructionalism. Now, for the modern contemporary philosophy, it is developed in the modern era. Contemporary philosophy is the present period in the history of the Western philosophy, beginning at the early 20th century with the increasing professionalization of the discipline and the rise of analytic and continental philosophy. Let's take a look at its characteristics. Number 1. The rise of modern science and technology. 2. Development of modern scientific methods. 3. No restrictions to logical reasoning. 4. The desire to recapture the independence of philosophical thought. This time, let's talk about its implications to education. The teacher is not the center of the instruction, but rather a facilitator. So, unlike before, teacher decides on almost everything, right? And sometimes the teacher acts as if he or she is the master inside the classroom, which results to giving less attention to what is really relevant and the needs of the learners. The goal is to help students better understand who they are as individuals. So that is why in the present curriculum we have now, right, the K to 12, we have introduced different strands, different tracks to our learners that allow them to practice freedom, to choose which do they want to take. People learn best from what they consider most relevant to their lives. So this only means na it's very important in our curriculum to include or much better have it center the needs, the experiences, the interest, and the abilities of our students. Teachers are making school interesting and useful by planning lessons that provoke curiosity. So, in the modern schools or in the modern education, students are actively learning because if something or the lesson presented by the teacher provokes curiosity, syempre, maeengganyo ang mga bata na mag-participate sa klase. So again, actively learning or active learning ay kung saan yung mga students natin ay na-encourage na mag-participate or nakikita natin doon na mataas yung kanilang engagement sa kapwa learners. So, this can result to improvement to their performance. Teaching methods tend to rely on so-called skill and drill exercises. So, if there's consistent repetition of activities, then there will be effective reinforcement of response patterns. So, pag paulit-ulit po yung exercises natin, there's a bigger chance na mas madaling ma-develop ang kanilang mga skills. But we have to also consider or we have to remember na syempre yung too much repetition ng activities ay maglilid rin siya to boredom, which is very bad. For learning to occur, teachers should prepare the environment that will help learners to learn, such as arranging activities that suit environment. So medyo parang makaka-relate tayo sa word na contextualization dito. So, for me, like for example, kami dito sa amin, I'm not going to talk or use examples in my class, subjects like New York City, Paris, taxi, or animals like sloth, giraffe, kasi nga hindi lahat ay makaka-relate. So, syempre, yung environment natin ay dapat yung sinasabi natin conducive para mas magiging effective yung development at learning ng mga bata. Students will be motivated to learn a subject if it's something they need and want to know. Of course, what's the sense of being there in front of the learners as a teacher when the students are not motivated enough to listen, not eager enough to learn new things in your class? So the teacher has a big role here. It also depends on the kind of strategies, the methods, the techniques ni teacher na yung sense na you have to present the subject or the lessons in a more meaningful and creative manner. Students should not be always taught what to learn, but how to learn. So, this is very obvious sa traditional educational system natin, or I mean sa old educational system natin, kung saan we were more on memorizing here and there, yung mga dates, yung mga tao, names ng mga people. Kaya pag tinatanong tayo, ano po yung subjects na mahirap para sa atin, always talaga present yung mathematics. Kasi nga, more on problem solving siya. And we all know at sa early stages or sa early years natin before, hindi masyadong na-emphasize sa curriculum, sa old curriculum, yung problem solving. Kasi yung mga teachers natin, they are more focused on memorizing. Classroom management should prefer more on the constructive approaches, such as discipline with dignity. And I agree to this kasi nga we have the so-called positive discipline in everyday teaching, PDET. I attended seminar on this last year, and it was emphasized there that when we discipline students, the purpose is not to embarrass them, but to teach them in a good way without dragging their confidence down. Kasi ang nangyayari pag hindi constructive yung approach natin towards them, magiging rebellious sila, and yung worst cases ay they will think of something suicide. And this is very true. That's why we as teachers, we also have to be very sensitive with our words, especially yung mga kabataan ngayon, yung mga kabataan natin ngayon. They are very, I don't know what's the exact term, pero we have to be very careful with our words. Provides the solution to teaching language because the approach allows the teachers to select what works within their own dynamic context. So that's why we have the MTB, or the mother tongue based. So dito sa amin, we for the grades 1, 2, 3, they have the sinubuan ng Binisaya. Teachers must be prepared to tackle diverse classrooms. The hope that by equipping teachers with the tools to discuss these topics productively, they will have the opportunity to influence change in their students. So there we have it. Those are the implications of the modern contemporary philosophies in the world of education. So those are based on the 20th and 21st century philosophies such as existentialism, progressivism, experimental, humanism, eclecticism, and reconstructionalism. That's all from my report this afternoon, and thank you for listening, everyone. I hope you guys learned something, realized something as a person who has philosophies in life, and as a modern teacher who lives with a big mission in every student's life. Once again, good afternoon.